The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the community center as Robert Martinez pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway. At 52, his weathered hands told the story of a man who had worked hard all his life. The denim shirt beneath his worn apron was always pressed, despite the long hours he put in to keep the building spotless. Robert had been the head janitor here for 8 years now, ever since his wife Sarah passed away from cancer. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and allowed him to be home when his teenage daughter Emma got back from school. She was everything to him now, his reason for getting up each morning. The community center buzzed with activity most evenings. Tonight was different, though. Marcus Thompson, the local martial arts coach, had rented the main gymnasium for what he called a public demonstration. Marcus was 38, built like a prize fighter, with a modern undercut hairstyle and the kind of confidence that commanded attention wherever he went. Robert had watched Marcus teach classes before. The man was skilled, no doubt about it, but there was something in his manner that rubbed Robert the wrong way. Perhaps it was how Marcus spoke to the older students, or the way he dismissed anyone who didn't meet his physical standards. As Robert mopped the entrance area, he could hear Marcus addressing the growing crowd in the gymnasium. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus's voice carried through the building. "Tonight, I want to show you what real martial arts looks like. Not the watered-down stuff you see in movies, but authentic combat training that separates the warriors from from everyone else." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Robert continued his work, but he couldn't help listening as Marcus continued his presentation. "You see, martial arts isn't just about technique," Marcus proclaimed, his voice growing louder. "It's about having the heart of a fighter. It's about proving you belong in the arena with real men." Robert paused in his mopping. There was something about that tone that reminded him of the bullies from his own youth, the ones who had made his life difficult because he was quieter, gentler than they expected a boy to be. Suddenly, Marcus's voice cut through his thoughts like a blade. "In fact, let me demonstrate something right now. I challenge anyone here, anyone at all, to step onto this mat with me. Let's see who among you has what it takes to face a real fighter." The gymnasium fell silent. Robert could picture the scene. All those people looking at each other, waiting for someone else to volunteer. "Come on," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a mocking edge. "Surely someone here isn't afraid to test themselves against authentic martial arts training?" Robert heard footsteps in the hallway behind him. He turned to see Emma approaching, her backpack slung over her shoulder. She was supposed to be studying at the library, but clearly the commotion had drawn her attention. "Dad, what's all the noise about?" she asked softly. Emma had inherited her mother's gentle nature and her father's quiet strength. Before Robert could answer, Marcus's voice boomed again from the gymnasium. "What about you there with the mop? Yes, you, the janitor. Surely a working man like yourself isn't afraid of a little physical challenge." Robert's heart sank. He looked toward the gymnasium entrance and saw Marcus pointing directly at him. A cocky grin spread across his face. The crowd had turned to stare, and Robert could feel the weight of their expectations. Emma touched her father's arm gently. "Dad, you don't have to—" "I know, sweetheart," Robert whispered back. But even as he said it, something stirred in his chest. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something deeper, a memory of his own father's words, spoken many years ago. "Robert, strength isn't about how hard you can hit someone. It's about standing up when it matters, even when you're scared." Robert looked at his daughter's concerned face, then back toward the gymnasium where Marcus waited with his arms crossed, clearly expecting Robert to decline and walk away. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Robert thought about his life, about the challenges he'd faced, the loss of his beloved Sarah, the struggles of raising Emma alone. He thought about all the times he'd chosen quiet dignity over confrontation, all the moments he'd walked away rather than engage with people like Marcus. but something was different tonight. Maybe it was the way Marcus had singled him out, or maybe it was the realization that Emma was watching, learning from his response. "Emma," Robert said quietly, setting down his mop. "Sometimes in life you have to show people who you really are." He walked slowly toward the gymnasium, his work boots making soft sounds on the polished floor. The crowd parted as he entered, and he could feel their curious stares. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed excited for the spectacle. Marcus stood in the center of the blue mat, his hands on his hips, that same cocky smile playing across his lips. "Well, well," Marcus said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The working man accepts the challenge. I have to admire that, even if this is going to be over pretty quickly." Robert stepped to the edge of the mat and looked around at the faces in the crowd. These were his neighbors, people he'd served quietly for years, keeping their community center clean and welcoming. Many of them probably didn't even know his name. "Before we begin," Robert said, his voice calm and steady, "I want you to know something about martial arts, Mr. Thompson." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting the janitor to speak up. Robert continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silent gymnasium. "I've been practicing Aikido for 25 years. I started when I was your age, actually. My sensei was an elderly Japanese man who taught me that true martial arts isn't about proving you're stronger than someone else." The crowd stirred with interest. Marcus's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "He taught me that the highest level of martial arts is using your opponent's energy against them, redirecting rather than meeting force with force. It's about protecting yourself and others without causing unnecessary harm." Robert stepped onto the mat, and something in his posture changed. The tired janitor seemed to straighten, his movements becoming more fluid and purposeful. "But most importantly," Robert continued, looking directly at Marcus, "he taught me that a true martial artist never uses their skills to intimidate or embarrass others. The strongest person in the room is often the one who chooses not to fight." The gymnasium was completely silent now. Even Emma, watching from the doorway, seemed to hold her breath. Marcus, clearly flustered by this unexpected turn of events, tried to regain control of the situation. "That's all very philosophical," he said, his voice slightly less confident than before. "But philosophy won't help you when you're facing a real fighter." What happened next unfolded like a gentle dance. Marcus rushed forward with an aggressive attack, expecting to overwhelm the older man quickly. But Robert moved like water, stepping aside at just the right moment and using Marcus's own momentum to guide him past. Marcus stumbled slightly, caught off guard by Robert's fluid movement. He turned and tried again, this time with a series of punches that Robert deflected effortlessly, his movements economical and precise. The crowd watched in amazement as the janitor they'd barely noticed seemed to float around the younger, stronger man. Robert never struck back, never showed aggression. Instead, he simply neutralized each attack with minimal effort, making Marcus look clumsy and off balance. After several minutes of this, Marcus was breathing heavily, frustration clear on his face. Robert, meanwhile, seemed as calm as when they'd started. "That's enough," Robert said softly, stepping back. "I think we've both made our point." But Marcus, his pride wounded and his reputation at stake, made one final desperate lunge. This time, Robert had no choice but to act more decisively. With a movement so quick it was almost invisible, he redirected Marcus's energy and gently placed him on the ground, controlling him completely but without causing injury. The gymnasium erupted in applause, but Robert immediately helped Marcus to his feet, making sure he wasn't hurt. "You're very skilled," Robert said quietly to Marcus, so only he could hear. "But skill without wisdom is just violence waiting to happen. Your students deserve better than that." Marcus looked into Robert's eyes and saw something there. Not victory or dominance, but genuine concern and kindness. The older man's words hit him harder than any physical blow could have. Robert turned to address the crowd, his voice warm and inclusive. True strength comes from lifting others up, not putting them down. It comes from protecting those who need protection, from teaching with patience and humility. He gestured toward Marcus, who was still catching his breath but listening intently. This young man has impressive physical skills. If he chooses to teach with wisdom and compassion, he could help a lot of people find confidence and inner strength. That's what martial arts should really be about. As the crowd began to disperse, many people approached Robert to thank him or ask about his training. Emma ran up and hugged her father tightly. "Dad, I never knew you could do that," she said, her voice full of pride and amazement. Robert smiled and smoothed her hair. "There are many things about people that we never see, sweetheart. The custodian might be a martial artist, the quiet person in the corner might be a brilliant poet. The person who seems ordinary might have extraordinary kindness in their heart." Later that evening, as Robert finished cleaning the gymnasium, Marcus approached him quietly. "Mr. Martinez," Marcus began, clearly having learned Robert's name from someone in the crowd, "I owe you an apology. I was showing off tonight trying to prove something that didn't need proving." Robert paused in his work and looked at the younger man with genuine kindness. "We all make mistakes, Marcus. What matters is what we learn from them." Marcus nodded, his earlier arrogance replaced with something resembling humility. Would you maybe consider teaching me some of what you know? Not the techniques, but the philosophy behind it. The wisdom part." Robert smiled, the same gentle smile he'd given his daughter earlier. "I think that could be arranged. But you should know, the most important lessons happen slowly, over many years. There are no shortcuts to true understanding." "I think I'm ready for that," Marcus replied, and for the first time that evening, his voice carried no trace of cockiness or false bravado. As Robert finished his work and prepared to go home, he reflected on the evening's events. He hadn't sought confrontation or victory. He'd simply stood up when it mattered, shown kindness when it would have been easier to show anger, and demonstrated that true strength comes from within. Walking home with Emma, Robert felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons life had taught him and for the opportunity to pass them on to the next generation. The community center was clean and quiet now, ready for another day of serving the neighborhood. And somewhere in the darkness, two very different men were both looking forward to tomorrow's conversation. One eager to learn, the other grateful for the chance to teach with wisdom and compassion.